Good afternoon. It's Wednesday, the 10th of September, just after 1 o'clock. Welcome to UK Column News. I'm your host, Mike Robinson, and joining me in the studio today, Brian Gerrish. Welcome to the programme, Brian.
Thank you.
And joining us via live link are researcher and activist Sandi and journalist and peace campaigner Vanessa Beeley. Later in the programme, Vanessa is going to be reporting on a huge contract with a certain Israeli defence contractor that we all know to train British military personnel. Sandi is going to have more on the funding behind the migrant operation here in the UK, and we'll be taking a further look at Unit 8200 and the Online Safety Act. But we'll begin today, Brian, with security guarantees, or at least the ramping up of the narrative around that topic.
Yes, indeed. And the subject, of course, is the supposed Russian drone attack on Poland. I've just chosen the Guardian headline here, which at least is relatively measured. Poland shoots down drones over its territory amid a Russian attack on Ukraine. And the reason I'm emphasizing this headline is, of course, in most of the Western media, it's simply labeled as a Russian attack, but there are lots of questions to be asked. The other thing in that picture was lots of F-16s, F-35s have also been involved, according to reports. But my point is that the F-16 is being promoted again as the wonder weapon. It was the F-16 airborne to shoot down drones. But Tusk made some statements. This is one of the key ones. We're dealing with large-scale provocation. We're ready to repel such provocations. The situation is serious, and no one doubts that we must prepare for various scenarios. Poland has successfully repelled the attack, and there is no reason to panic. Did they successfully repel, and was it an attack? These are some questions points we need to look at. So basically, Poland's military command said that it said that there were more than 10 objects. And this is interesting because we'll have a little bit of a discussion about how many drones there supposedly were. But Poland's military said more than 10 objects. And those that could pose a threat were neutralized in the early hours of Wednesday. Some of the drones that enter our airspace were shot down. Searches and efforts to locate the potential crash sites of these objects are ongoing. So it's vague. When you start to pull apart the reports, what's actually being talked about is pretty vague. But if we bring the BBC up, because of course the BBC in general is ramping up the fear. This is a major Russian attack on Poland. This is going to give the opportunity for NATO to respond. So here's the BBC headline in the box. Poland says that up to 4 of 19 Russian drones were shot down after entering the airspace. Now, to date, there's absolutely no factual reported evidence that these were Russian drones. But of course, the BBC quick to say absolutely they were. When we get into the more detailed reporting by the BBC, it gets into the numbers of drones and how many were brought down and how many were found. But there's really no analysis at all on what these drones were and what the evidence was to identify them as Russian. Now, of course, the other person coming into the mix was Zelensky. He wasn't happy with the idea of 19, and he suggested at least 24 Russian drones had entered Poland. And of course, he was already ramping it up to say this is one of the reasons why you need me and Ukraine to defend Western Europe against those nasty Russians. The BBC just reports this as if it's factual, but there was a little bullet point here. You might not see it at the bottom of the box, so let's bring this up on your screen. Now, when you read the article, you're not sure whether this is part of what Zelensky is saying, or this is the BBC speaking to the reader, but the bullet point says, as a reminder, Polish Prime Minister Donald Tusk has said the Polish military recorded 19 drone incursions into the country's airspace overnight. Mike, I think this is the BBC attempting to grip the narrative. But of course, what they're doing is also underlining the fact that not even the BBC can trust a word that comes out of the mouth of Zelensky, who they are normally promoting as an accurate spokesperson for what's happening with the war. Now, I've been paying attention for the whole 1,200 days of the war to many people reporting, and there's some really excellent social media analysis. I just decided to have a look at a little bit of this. Now, one of the things that was being circulated in relation to this attack was the image on screen. Now, this is not a war drone. This is if you like, a drone to practice drone attacks. But this was photographed, and there's some suggestions that this is one of the drones that appeared in Poland, but I have no idea whether that is correct or not. But if we look at the comment, Poland, yesterday border closure, today drone raid, tomorrow a no-fly zone, ? And what they're getting at there is this effectively a false flag to allow NATO to extend air cover into Western Ukraine? And I think there's a lot of reasons we should be very suspicious of the NATO position. But if we continue the commentary from this particular source, today some unidentified flying objects. This is deliberately bringing some black humour into the commentary, but we know from the Polish reports themselves, they said one had not been identified. Today, some UFOs enter Polish territory, shot down by air defence, but no one shows the debris. And I think this is very key, Mike. Nobody's showing debris, because that would say without any doubt that the attack was Russian, and to date, nothing's come forward. But if we continue the commentary from social media, I have no doubt it is Duran wreckage, i.e. that would be Russian drone wreckage. There is tons of it in Ukraine, and a few hundred kilograms, so the Poles can wave it around at press conferences is no problem. So what they're doing here is also pointing out that there's enough wreckage in Ukraine for that to be transferred into NATO, to be presented as so-called evidence of a Russian attack. But if you analyse the situation, what would Russia gain out of such an attack? It would give NATO the excuse it needed to group up and possibly bring Ukraine into the fold. Why would Russia do it? It simply doesn't make sense. Now, what we need to remember is, of course, that huge numbers of Russian drones are being used in the attack. This is some data back from July, but it's talking about nearly 6,500 drones being launched in the period. And below the line is those that have been shot down. And Ukraine is always trying to make out that its air defences are still working perfectly. And this is actually a Ukrainian map of the air routes. This has come supposedly from their air defence systems, showing the extent of this the Russian drone raid taking place on Ukraine, as supposedly the attack in Poland was taking place. Now, the coordination of this attack and previous attacks, Mike, is simply incredible from the Russian side. And the idea that 19 drones went into Poland by accident is simply not credible. So we need to know whether they were Russian or not. And I'm also going to point out here that, surprisingly, Defence HQ, this is the British Ministry of Defence, on their Twitter channel, was busily talking about the war effort ramping up British industry. This goes on and on and on. What we're not seeing is anything about drones. And we'll just highlight in a minute here that British government is very happy that they've apparently now got 800,000 plus students involved in the defence industry. So at the same time, Russia's being criticised for bringing young people into the war effort, we are boasting that we are bringing 800,000 students and a lot of promotion of women into the defence effort, but absolutely no commentary on Russian drones, which I think is very significant. So the key is we need that evidence that indeed these drones in Poland were Russian.
And that they were shot down in Polish airspace and not...
Well, yes, of course. It's very difficult to say. Some of the wreckage has been found, 5 and 1 identified in Lublin province in Poland, and 2 one in a more central location and one in a more northern location. But let's see whether we see the images.
Vanessa, let's welcome you to the program. And the defence contractor that was referring to at the beginning of the program, who could that have been?
Well, none other than Elbit Systems, of course, the center of all the controversy over the prescribing of Palestine Action as a terrorist group in the UK for actually sabotaging Elbit Systems that are providing 85% globally of the drones to the Israeli military. So this was back in February, a report in Shepherd Defense Media. Final two contenders for key $2 billion British Army training contract selected, and that reduced it back then down to two main contenders that were mentioned in the article. For the Army Collective Training Service, acronym is ACTS. Of the 7 original bidders for the partnership, 3 had already withdrawn. The 2 successful consortia are Omnia Training, led by Raytheon UK, and a team led by Elbit Systems UK. And then much more recently, towards the end of August, this was in the campaign against armed violence, the director of the organization, Ian Overton, wrote that concern as the Ministry of Defence reportedly poised to hand $2 billion in training deal to Elbit Systems, Israel's largest arms firm. And let's have a look. I'll just summarize in the next slide basically what was said within the article. So the project is to deliver training for 60,000 British soldiers each year. It will transform how the army prepares for operations, while in fact there's very little detail on what that preparation will include. Since 2023, Elbit has been involved in Project Vulcan, a £57 million 10-year program to train tank crews. It is wholly owned and controlled by Israel, Elbit Systems. This is very important because it's very much portrayed by the British government as being a UK company. But the profits from UK arms production flow back to Israel, and there is a major senior staff overlap. It is a UK subsidiary. It's a local contractor to the British regime and part of Israel's wider military-industrial complex. So it's very much smoke and mirrors when the British government tries to basically hide the fact that the government is not involved with an Israeli weapons manufacturing outfit that is complicit with the genocide of Palestinians in Gaza and the occupied territories. Even beyond this, it was actually private eye, but reported by Ian Overton, that there are 2 senior members of British Armed Forces that have now joined the advisory board of Elbit in the UK, the first being Sir Simon Bolam. You can freeze frame and read the details on him. And the second being, the next slide, please, Lieutenant General Sir Mark Poffley, KCB OBE. Both of them very high-level members of, or former members of the Ministry of Defence, now joining an Israeli arms company that is complicit in genocide against Palestinians. Now, this has generated a motion from within Parliament, basically raising alarms about the Armed Forces training contract and Elbit Systems. And if we have a quick look at the text of that motion, it's been signed by, I think, upwards of 25 MPs, the majority being from Plaid Cymru and Labour, unsurprisingly. But what it actually says is that, as I said, Elbit supplies 85% of drones to the Israeli military, conducting what is described by many international humanitarian law organizations, including the ICJ, as a genocide. It will entrench Elbit at the heart of UK defense, so an Israeli company, again, at the heart of UK defense industry. And of course, we've been covering that at UK Column, the involvement in Oracle, in the storage of information for the Ministry of Defence and other sectors of British governance. And from a reputational, legal and moral perspective, this puts Britain in danger of being prosecuted, of course, for being complicit in genocide. That is their main concern. At the same time, we still have the unlawful keeping the Filton 24 members of Palestine Action who led the direct action campaign against Elbit Systems in an attempt to highlight the genocide and prevent the genocide. And they, of course, have spent a year, in fact, I think now it's more, in prison without trial. The first trial of, I think, 3 members of Palestine Action will be taking place on the 17th of November at Woolwich Crown Court. And we've also talked regularly about the conditions that these young people are being kept in remand. I mean, effectively, they are going through abuse and torture at the hands of the state. Now, one interesting fact is that very recently, this was in The Guardian, Israeli arms manufacturer closes the UK facility targeted by Palestine Action. Now, this is perceived as a success at the hands of direct action by Palestine Action. My suspicion is that it's going to reemerge somewhere else, potentially be renamed or rebranded. So we need to keep an eye on that. But absolutely extraordinary that the British government is pursuing collaboration with Elbit Systems, despite all of the controversy surrounding it, while effectively torturing and abusing their own citizens for actually protesting genocide in the UK.
You got some thoughts?
Yes, indeed. I just wanted to say, Vanessa, that absolutely take the point of the links with the Israeli company and the genocide currently going on in Gaza, but not even aside from that, the fact that we have a foreign nation, namely Israel, now burying itself directly into the heart of UK military training. This is at a level which it means that Israel would be given access to every single real capability, particularly of the army. This to me is utterly incredible. What decision has been taken that Israel is trustworthy enough to even deal with training secrets within the UK military, aside from the secondary point, which is, absolutely valid, of this company being linked into the horrors going on in Gaza? I've talked about this dual nationality problem before, and I think that you are absolutely highlighting it here.
Any comment?
No, I totally agree with that.
Yeah. Okay. Well, look, thank you, Vanessa. Sandi, let's welcome you to the program then. And we've been talking over the last couple of weeks about maybe what's going on behind the scenes with respect to the incitement of feeling and emotion with people in the UK over the migrant issue. What have you got on this? Yes. Sorry, Sandi. I'm afraid we can't hear you. I think you're going to need to try to reconnect. We might need to move on and come back to this.
Well, just before we do, Mike, I think just to add a little bit more to this business of Israel, it's quite incredible that back in the days of Francis Maude, he was the minister who suddenly announced that we'd gone into this massive pact with Israel, MOU, I think it was a memorandum of understanding at the time, which meant that Israeli intelligence services were absolutely going to be partnered with British intel. We were going to be bringing in GCHQ, we were going to be bringing in the universities, and there was absolutely no full debate in the House of Commons over the risks of this. And now we've moved forward to the fact that Israel is not only burying itself into the NHS, it's now at the heart of British military. It's becoming difficult to tell whether we've got a government which is actually being run from Westminster for the benefit of the people in UK, or we're simply now some sort of overseas colony of Israel. I'm being pretty tough in this, but I think there's some really serious questions to be asked. And we should also be looking at the names of the people who've set up these joint arrangements with Israel. Who were they? Where are the minutes of the meeting? And what is proposed next?
Sandi, are we able to hear you?
Yeah, can
Yes,
you hear
we
me
can.
now?
Yes, brilliant.
Good,
Okay,
good.
so let's over to you
Thank
then.
you. Yeah, I mean, I've been. Thank you very much. I've been looking really at the division that's happening within the UK and actually all over Europe over the immigration crisis, and I just looked at this quote from Karl Marx where he said, "A spectre is haunting Europe. All the powers of Europe have entered into a holy alliance to exercise this spectre. Pope, Tsar, and Metternich and Guizot, French radicals and German police and spies." Basically, what he's saying is there's a spectre. Now, that's not the only spectre. Communism, obviously, is what he's talking about. But we've got another spectre. And I just want to sort of, some people may have seen this. I saw it certainly 10 years ago. In Sweden, a lady called Barbara Lerner Spector made a very bold claim. She said, Europe has not yet learned how to be multicultural, but it must become so if it is to survive. And our people, bearing in mind she's Israeli, our people will be at the center of making this happen. Now, these words weren't just off the cuff. She was the founder of a company called Paideia Institute, which is backed by the Swedish government and funded. And she was part of something bigger, a web of radical NGOs and foundations shaping Europe's future. So let's see what she had to say 10 years ago.
I think there's a resurgence of anti-Semitism because at this point in time, Europe has not yet learned how to be multicultural. And I think we're going to be part of the throes of that transformation, which must take place. Europe is not going to be the monolithic societies that they once were in the last century. Jews are going to be at the center of that. It's a huge transformation for Europe to make. They are now going into a multicultural mode, and Jews will be resented because of our leading role. But without that leading role and without that transformation, Europe will not survive.
Right. I think when she said monolithic, I think she meant sort of traditional Christian, values of Europe. So it's quite interesting what she said there. Now, I want to just look at some of these NGOs. We've got the one called HIAS, which is the Hebrew Immigrant Aid Society. And we've got Open Society, Foundations of George Soros as well. The American Jewish Committee, and the European Jewish Congress. So some of these, I mean, they're heavily funded, and they have billions in resources to fund any program they wish. And this program, which is, let's face it, it is the Kudnov Kalergi program, which people are given the Charlemagne Prize for actually rolling this out in Europe. So I think the shared reasoning of what she's saying is she's saying a multicultural Europe is a safer Europe for minorities, especially Jews. And at first it sounds kind of noble. Who wouldn't argue against tolerance and safety and diversity? But if you look closer, there's massive double standards, as we can see. In Europe, the message is clear. It's break down the old order, tear away the traditional values, and dissolve the nation state. It's diversity at any cost. But in Israel, the message is the polar opposite. Israel defines itself as a Jewish state. Immigration is tightly controlled. The demographics are guarded. And multiculturalism is seen as a direct threat to survival. So how can it be both? This is my question. So, we've now got this march on the 13th. Toby Robinson is leading another one of his marches. And the target really is immigration. So ordinary working class people are quite rightly angry at what's going on in Europe and our country, because it's too fast, it's the scale of it, and we don't, it's unregulated. So what the Muslims are seen to be being scapegoated, and the real architects of this policy remain kind of, behind the scenes. So the aim is to create division without question, and it's manufactured division that we simply can't tolerate. And the thing is that when you've got a lot of people, in one place, we have to be mindful. And my sort of message really to anybody that's going to that march is that this is a perfect opportunity to almost play their own game. And literally, all people of Britain who are call this home and are all coming together on this march to stop the destruction of the place they call home, need to be really together on this, and there shouldn't be any tension. And they should be coming together to literally be that force of unity in fighting, not fighting this, but in standing against the destruction of the UK.
Sandi, thank you for that. Now, let's move on then to online safety. Yesterday apparently was Online Safety Day 2. We'll explain that in a second. But vulnerable people across the UK are going to be shielded from the most dangerous online content, as new laws are set to be introduced to prevent devastating self-harm material from reaching people of all ages. And I hope you appreciate that those are not my words. Those are the words of the British government. So yesterday they announced urgent action, this is their words again, to toughen the Online Safety Act by putting stricter legal requirements on tech companies to hunt down and remove material that encourages or assists serious self-harm before it can destroy lives and tear families apart. While platforms already have to take specific steps to protect children, they say, from this dangerous self-harm content, the government recognises that adults battling mental health challenges are equally at risk from exposure to material that could trigger a mental health crisis or worse. And they say that these new regulations mean that content encouraging or assisting serious harm will be treated as priority offence for all users. This change will trigger the strongest possible legal protections, compelling platforms to use cutting-edge technology to actively seek out and eliminate this content before it can reach users and cause irreparable harm, rather than simply reacting after someone has already been exposed to it. So that's what they had to say about this. Now, this is the first act of Liz Kendall. There she is. Happy Liz there. And this is just a couple of days since she became Technology Secretary. She says the regulations will come into force 21 days after they're made, following approval by both houses of Parliament. Now, don't make me laugh, please. This is going to be done via statutory instrument, which is going to be laid before Parliament, probably on an indeterminate Sunday during the autumn, when no one's there to challenge it. So this is a new level of censorship, which is being imposed under the guise of protecting vulnerable people from harmful content. It should be noted here that the direct encouragement of suicide is already illegal under the 1961 Suicide Act, unless it's assisted suicide,
yes,
of course.
I knew that was coming.
Yeah. But content that portrays self-harm is not illegal. Neither is content which portrays suicide as positive or desirable, and neither is content which provides information on methods of self-harm. So this is the return of the legal but harmful issue that was supposedly dropped from the Online Safety Act before it was actually passed as an act. Of course, I'm not suggesting that content such as this is desirable or should be encouraged, but it's not illegal. And it is being used as a poster child for the rolling out of technology that scans social media content as it's being uploaded, so that it's censored before it ever appears on a platform. Now, I'm going to ask hands up anyone who thinks that this will stop with self-harm, because of course it won't. This is a significant expansion of the Online Safety Act scope, moving from the idea of sort of reactively taking down content to anticipation of whatever that content might be. And of course, they've got to scan all content if they're going to identify content that is relevant to self-harm. So this is only the start. And remember, the Online Safety Act is an enabling act. It enables its own expansion via ministerial decree, as we've seen in this case. So let's then move on to the next step in the rollout of the Act, the so-called super complaints. The Online Safety Act allows expert organizations, you can laugh at that too, representing users or the public to make special complaints to Ofcom called a super complaint. These are their words. Super complaints should be about features of sites and apps that are regulated or the behavior of organizations who run them that risk causing serious harm to people or significantly affecting people's right to freedom of expression. Now, do you see what they did there? They enable super complaints, which will result in limiting people's right to free expression in order to protect people's right to free expression. How does that work?
Well, it's all thought crime, in my opinion.
Absolutely.
Mike. It's all thought crime.
Yeah. So super complaints are going to help organizations who are experts about online harm to ensure issues can be brought to Ofcom's attention. So note the language, organizations who are experts about online harm. I wonder who those could be. Well, let's have a look at what they say. So they say, who can make a super complaint? They talk about people who use regulated sites and apps, or people who represent people, sorry, try that again, organizations, because this can't be brought by an individual or people. It has to be brought by an organization who use the regulated sites and apps or who represent the general public or a specific group of people. That has to be an organization that operates independently from regulated sites and apps. And it has to be an organization that regularly takes part in public discussions about online safety as an expert. So that's basically it. We're seeing the massive ramping up of this situation and this legislation and this censorship regime. Where could it go wrong?
Well, everywhere, Mike. But I'll just say this is where Sandi's point is so important, that big demonstrations, violence helps exactly what we're warning about here in the news today. When people are quiet and measured, we've got a much better chance of getting through this type of pernicious censorship. So I just think that's worth highlighting.
Okay, let's move on then, and let's say that if you like what the UK Column does and you would like to support us, we do need your ongoing support. The options for helping us out are available via this button on the front page of the UK Column website. Please have a look, and if you can possibly support us, that'd be very much appreciated. A massive thank you to everybody that does. Now, people may have noticed that Germ did not produce a couple of interviews over the last couple of days. We're very sorry about that. There were technical issues around that, but I'm glad to say he is back tonight speaking to Simon Roche. So join us at 7 p.m. for that this evening. Great news on the on location event in York, I believe, but well, just before we came on air, Brian, just 2 tickets left.
Absolutely brilliant. Who is going to take the last 2 tickets? 2 individuals or a couple? I don't know. But please help us out. Let us sell these last 2 tickets. This will be absolutely wonderful full house for UK Column on Location in York. So utterly brilliant support from all our members and supporters, wherever you are.
We're very much looking forward to that. Yeah. And Brian, we've got, or at least you've got, a discussion with Kim Isherwood coming up soon.
Yes, being edited at the moment, but I just wanted to highlight it because Kim has gone from one woman challenging the sexual grooming of children through the education system to the fact that at the end of this month she'll be going to Washington with a group of other individuals to challenge the World Health Organization on their disgusting child sexuality education program. And Kim did a really brilliant interview with me warning about the specific dangers of that program. So I just want to say an amazing lady who has achieved and is achieving a huge amount.
Let's come back onto the issue of Israel and Gaza then, Brian.
Yes, well, I just want to highlight firstly the discussion that Patrick Henningsen and I had about the BBC documentary, Two Girls Shot in Gaza. This was by Stephanie Hegarty, the so-called population correspondent of the BBC World Service. But we took our time to analyse her work because we thought it was so good and so credible. What was she warning about? Israeli snipers, IDF snipers, deliberately targeting young children and toddlers in Gaza. Very emotional, but a very, very precise documentary. And if you haven't seen Patrick and my commentary on it, please go on the UK Columns website and have a look. Well, what did I see in the last day? But The Guardian here with an article, The Gaza Family Torn Apart by IDF Snipers from Chicago and Munich. And notice what is happening here. We're not dealing even with Israelis. We've now got members of the Jewish community who've been drawn back into Israel in order to take part of the Israeli Defense Forces. So are these people German? Are they American anymore? What are we dealing with? But the meat of this is that an investigation was carried out, and it included review of an interview that was done with an IDF sniper, Daniel Raab, who was a former Chicago basketball player. And this is some of his commentary over the death of 3 members of a family. And what happened is one was shot, he shot one, and then as the next family member came forward to try and recover the body, that person was then shot, and 3 members of the family were shot. So he says it's hard for me to understand why 19-year-old Salem Domosh tried to retrieve his brother's body, and it also doesn't really interest me. I mean, what was so important about that corpse? He went on to say the people in Gaza, are thinking, oh, I don't think I'll get shot because I'm wearing civilian clothes and I'm not carrying a weapon and all that. But they were wrong. That's what you have snipers for. This, Mike, in my opinion, this is very, very callous language, even for a sniper. He is obviously very happy that civilians are coming forward into his sights, and he believes he can kill them all with impunity. He goes on to say civilians, just kept on coming to try and take these bodies, and I've added, so I took easy shots to kill them. This is really disgusting material, and this is a result of a 5-month investigation. So this is on top of the BBC's own investigation of other cases. Daniel Raab goes on to say it's a question of distance. There is a line that we define. They, the ordinary people of Gaza, don't know where this line is, but we do. So civilians are trying their best just to live amongst the carnage and the rubble of Gaza. They cross a line of which they are not aware, and an American Israeli sniper simply uses that as his cue to kill them. And he goes on to say that his team killed 105 people during his Gaza deployment. That's really impressive. This, to me, this is a war crime. There's no ifs or buts, and the evidence is mounting. If we have a look at other comments in the article, the reporter who interviewed the Gazan family that lost 3 members asked not to be named because Israel has killed at least 189 journalists in Gaza. This is something that's simply not really being discussed on a world scale. And the article went on to say that establishing an invisible security perimeter, then shooting civilians who cross it, has become a common practice in Gaza. Israeli soldiers have testified. So this is not an investigation into one individual. There's a number of people commenting. And the article goes on to say the attacks match a pattern described by a former Israeli reservist who told The Guardian that soldiers he served with in Gaza repeatedly shot unarmed Palestinians trying to collect bodies. And I'll bring back on screen here the whole question. These are dual nationality individuals. So where does their loyalty lie? Will they think they can kill people in America or Germany in order to protect Israel? We don't know. And are these men committing war crimes on behalf of Israel? If so, they should surely be tried for it. I think this is some of the most disgusting stuff that I've come across, Mike. People dying in explosions and bombings, yeah, particularly bad. But we've got people who are simply being given weapons to go and hunt and shoot children, toddlers, and unarmed people as if it was some sort of sport.
Well, I'm going to don't have time to get comment from Vanessa right now, but I absolutely want to talk about this in extra because first of all, I suspect this has been going on for much longer than just the last couple of years. But also we've seen this type of thing in other conflicts as well. So I want to talk about this quite a bit more in extra. But look, let's look at Unit 8200 because it's around a month since Microsoft claimed to have begun an urgent inquiry into the Israeli Signals Intelligence and Cyber Warfare Agency, Unit 8200's use of their infrastructure, that's Microsoft's infrastructure, to store and analyze millions of intercepted phone calls from Palestinians in Gaza and the West Bank, allegedly for surveillance and airstrike target identification. And of course, this is in possible violation of Microsoft terms of service, never mind the complicity in the genocide issue. So a month has passed, and there have been no updates from Microsoft, nor any effort to drop Unit 8200 as a customer. It seems to be. So let's just make sure that they're both on screen so that we know what their various logos look like. Now, the allegations against Unit 8200 came via investigative reporting by The Guardian, but also by Plus 972 magazine. And also an organization called Local Call. The report asserts that Unit 8200 maintained its own siloed Azure, that's Microsoft Azure, that's their cloud platform environment, allegedly granted through a deal with Microsoft's chief executive directly. Analysts claim that the data was instrumental in identifying bombing targets. And now this has been going on since 2002. And the claim is that more than 11,500 terabytes of intercepted Palestinian communications data are stored on Microsoft servers in the Netherlands, and that this is equivalent to 200 million hours of phone calls, in addition to additional data in Ireland and also in Israel. This is the second inquiry launched by Microsoft. An earlier one announced in May this year reportedly found no evidence or misuse or targeting of civilians. Note the word civilians there, but even that is in dispute. So Microsoft claims in its statement that the CEO and other executives were unaware of the nature of the data being stored, although documents suggest a 2021 meeting between the chief executive and Unit 8200's commander, Yossi Sariel, were plans to move up to 70% of intelligence data onto, so that's the Unit 8200's intelligence data, onto Azure, were discussed, according to these various reports. The revelations sparked strong reactions within Microsoft. Employees protested, and a group called No Azure for Apartheid demanded that Microsoft cut ties with the Israeli military. And Microsoft shareholders also called for greater transparency and human rights due diligence, but you'll note they didn't call for the dumping of the customer. So let's just have a reminder of what 8200 is. As I said in the beginning, it's Israel's Signals Intelligence and Cyber Warfare Agency within the IDF. So it's equivalent to GCHQ or in the UK or the NSA in the United States. It was set up in 1952. It engages in offensive cyber warfare as well as signals intelligence. It's been connected to high-profile operations such as the Stuxnet attack on Iran's nuclear centrifuges. And it has a track record of engaging in AI-enhanced targeting, including operations against Hamas and other so-called adversaries. We might read that as civilians, particularly under the leadership of Yossi Sariel that we've just mentioned. Now, according to the World Socialist website, more than 60% of its personnel are now engineers or data scientists. It's established AI factories and a centralized target center to accelerate the process from data interception to actionable targeting using AI and cloud infrastructure. And so, I'm going to just put in here, isn't any surprise that both the UK and the United States are working as fast as they can to catch up because they want this as well. Now, this latest situation is only scratching the surface of what they've been up to, of course, because they've cultivated what is being described as a flourishing alumni network. 8,200 veterans have founded or lead, and we've talked about this many times, they've founded or lead prominent cyber and tech startups like, for example, Checkpoint, Blackcube, Carbine, Candiru, Palo Alto Networks. Other former staff have moved into influential roles in tech firms like Google, Microsoft, Apple, Meta, Amazon, OpenAI, NVIDIA. And Israeli surveillance companies, again, many of them founded by Unit 8200 veterans, export offensive cyber tools worldwide. Companies like Cognite collect telecoms data and metadata for analysis. Others market biometric, network intelligence, and spyware systems to Western agencies, including law enforcement and intelligence services. And as I was reporting on Friday last week, immigration agents in the United States will once again have access to what was described as one of the most sophisticated hacking tools after the Trump regime's decision, to renew a contract with Paragon Solutions, who produce spyware product called Graphite. This organization is embedded directly into the heart of everything that we do on the internet. It is absolutely using its technology to target Palestinians and of course, hosting that on companies that Western individuals are funding often. So,
Yeah.
I think we need to be reconsidering where we're putting our money.
Indeed. Yeah.
Where does that take us? Back to Vanessa, I believe. And Vanessa, some commentary on the BRICS nations.
Yes, I'm going to probably ruffle a few feathers with this short report, and I'm sure it warrants further discussion in extra. But I wanted to focus on a statement made by Iran's Supreme Leader, Ayatollah Sayyid al-Khamenei, in the last few days, where he calls basically for a global economic and political quarantine of the enemy, meaning Israel. He encourages all Islamic and non-Islamic nations, and I'm assuming he's referring to BRICS nations, of which Iran is a member, because obviously appealing to Western countries isn't going to have much effect. But he appeals for them to cut all trade ties, suspending port access, freezing bank transactions, denying energy supply, and severing political relations to bring pressure to bear to end the genocide, both in Gaza and, of course, in the occupied territories. Now, I will refer people to this article that I published, Up at the Wall Will Fall, which was written by Professor Patrick Bond, I think, in November last year. The blessing, you'll remember the curse and blessing map that Netanyahu showed at the UNGA, showing countries within BRICS being included in the blessing, and of course Iran being included in the curse. The blessing for genocide, nearly all BRICS regimes nurture Israel economically. Now, of course, when we talk about international law, and all BRICS countries do make statements adhering to international law and condemning the West for violating or basically shredding humanitarian law, Geneva Conventions, particularly on genocide, and international law generally. Now, this is a new account on X that is putting out some good data on this kind of subject, and I do recommend following them. Yesterday, they sent me this. So BRICS is reshaping a multipolar world, but how are they responding to Israel's genocide of Palestinians? Our latest analysis tracks 2025 exports January to July to Israel versus 2024 with critical insights. Now, first of all, they summarize China and India, top military suppliers to Israel. Russia, Egypt, and the UAE, leading energy exporters to Israel. Brazil and South Africa are the ones that are kind of throttling back on energy exports. dropping in the ranking in 2025. And what they say is BRICS trade patterns reveal stark divides in geopolitical stances. Now, I want to have a look at this infograph that they, no, I won't. I'll first of all mention recent reports in Israeli media on a new deal, in fact, between Israel and India, who inked a bilateral investment deal in New Delhi to foster trade ties. Just one example of the collaboration between BRICS nations and Israel. Not only Israel, I would also mention countries like the UAE and Saudi Arabia that historically were established by the British to actually form a partnership with the Zionist entity and protect it from the resistance pan-Arab alliances that might threaten it in the future. That's an important point to make. So if we can just keep this following diagram on screen, people can zoom in on it, but just while I run through it, because I think it's important to do this, you can take your time and look more deeply into the information that's included on there and in the article that will be in the show notes. But if you look left to right, you see Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. In overall trade partnership, Russia is number 7, India is number 8, and China is number 1. And China is exponentially increasing its trade partnership with Israel. And that includes Chinese state companies being involved in the settlement pogroms in the occupied territories and investment in Haifa port to facilitate the offloading of weapons to the Israeli military. Russia is number 2 in energy supply. India, number 5. India and China are number 5 and number 3, respectively, in war goods. Now, that's quite an extraordinary statistic when one considers who are the primary partners, of course, from an armaments perspective for Israel. China is publicly saying that it's a genocide. Russia and India have not publicly said that in any of their statements. So I think the point is, if we look at the ICJ ruling from July 2024, all states are under an obligation not to recognize as legal the situation arising from the unlawful presence of the state of Israel in the occupied territories of Palestine, and to not render aid or assistance in maintaining the situation created by the criminal presence of Israel in the occupied territories. This is just one ruling. Of course, under the Geneva Convention, every state globally has a responsibility to both prevent genocide and punish the perpetrators of genocide. And while nobody is advocating that BRICS countries are responsible for what is happening, what we are saying is that they have the power to economically bring serious pressure to bear upon Israel and to stop the genocide. They have that ability, and therefore I think they should be held to account for not fulfilling that responsibility.
I struggle to argue with that, Vanessa. We'll have a go at arguing about it in extra, though, and it is an incredible situation. These countries, without doubt, doing some positive things in the world, but they have to be held account for whenever they're not. And I think this is one area where they, particularly because they're taking such a stand with respect to international law and the West. So we'll talk more about that in extra, absolutely. Sandi, let's come back to UK issues then, and the situation with respect to land management. And you're going to use the Somerset levels as an example.
Yes, I mean it's almost like it's gone full circle again. We've got a lot of. The Environment Agency just last month, at the end of last month, announced that they were they couldn't afford to dredge the reams and the watercourses that actually drain the Somerset levels, and they're not going to maintain the culverts or the pumping stations because they don't have any money, apparently. Now, this is what happened in 2014. We had a very similar time. We'd had a drought, and then than a massive spring rainfall, or not even spring. It was January and February rainfall. And there's a Somerset farmer who's put this together very, very well. That the parallels between 2014 and now. So if we can just listen to him first, that would be great.
Look at it, everyone. Feast your eyes upon its awesomeness. Yes, this is England's green and pleasant land. Right, it's not very green at the moment because it hasn't rained in 3 months. But picture the scene. Your business floods every year. It's underwater, in my case, about 120 acres, to the point where it cannot be used for anything. And up until that point, a business called the Environment Agency, an arm of the government, or someone funded by the government, would say, don't worry, we'll come along and we'll dig out all these big rivers for you, and these, what are they called, reams, so big ditches that you might know, and we're going to help maintain them so other places don't flood. Taunton, Langport, Yeovil, wherever it might be. Not anymore. This is going to directly affect you, everybody. The EA have announced, with 6 months notice period that they have to do, so when's that going to put us? Probably in the wettest part of the year, that they are no longer going to maintain about 80% of the rivers and reams that they currently do. Now, EA, if I've got that wrong, please come and tell me. Desperate Dan Zeichner, you head up DEFRA, you pay for the EA. Come and correct me if I'm wrong. I don't want to go to Facebook prison. So picture the scene. Your business, and I'm talking to you now, general public, is going to look like my business. Because if I'm getting feet of water sat on the countryside at the moment, and that water was being removed, what is going to happen now going forward? I think the government, I fear, have forgotten about the floods of 10 years ago, which were absolutely catastrophic for this part of the world, and it's only going to spread.
Well, there you have it, straight from the farmer, and he's absolutely right. I mean, when in 2014, I was actually down at Boroughbridge sandbagging overnight when the floods happened, because the River Parrett was going to come over the edge, and it was interesting how there was no help from the British government at all at that time, and people were evacuating their livestock. They were leaving their homes. Their homes were destroyed. Businesses were destroyed. Farms were destroyed and have never recovered, actually. And people are now living there, and they're uninsurable and uninsured because of this huge flood that happened, which covered, I think it was 65 square miles of Somerset. Now, when I was down there, all the press were there on the bridge, but no help at all. And I met a journalist called Christopher Booker, who worked for the Telegraph, and he published a very, very good article afterwards, and it was how it was a deliberate flooding of the levels. And I'm absolutely convinced he's right, because in this article he talks about that it was all policy decisions, deliberate policy decisions that led to the flooding. The Labour flood minister, Elliot Morley, at the time in 2005, he was later jailed for expenses fraud, adopted an EU habitats directed-driven policy to promote flooding for wildlife benefit. Dredging of the River Parrett was halted due to costly EU waste rules. Again, same thing that's happening now. And Morley also blocked a proposed pumping station at Dumble, which would have allowed 24-hour flood clearance. So by 2008-2009, the government and the Environment Agency openly recognised that increased flooding might breach property and human rights, but pressed ahead regardless. And they spent $8 million to restore the floodplains. So the Met Office, they put out a very misleading forecast of dry weather in November 2013, which led to South Lake Moor being deliberately flooded, obstructing water drainage when heavy rains arrived. So this combination of blocked drainage, no pumping stations, and the deliberate flood storage caused the devastation of these 65 square miles of Somerset. Now, afterwards, they made a big thing about repairing everything, and they made promises that they're now not keeping. Now, Christopher Booker, just to let you know, write the most amazing paper on global warming, a study on groupthink, which do look at that. That's on my website. You can find it online, and it's incredible. And he really knew what was going on. What was extraordinary was there was the lack of help from the British government or any agencies. The Environment Agency was nowhere to be seen. But what we did find is that they held a sort of almost like a photo shoot for the army. They turned up. They put a few sandbags down a line, and then they went again. So there was no help. But what we did have was help from a Sikh agency, and they were called Khalsa, and they were amazing people. They worked through the night, sandbagging and doing really, really good work, helping the people of Somerset. And they'd flown in from the Haiti earthquake to do that. So it just shows you that what a third world country we're becoming. And that was in 2014. So I just want to highlight what I found out, because when I was down there with Christopher Booker, he did say, look at policy 6 of the Environment Agency, because I spoke to him and he confirmed that it was Agenda 21, which it was then. It wasn't even Agenda 2030. He said, this has all been put together by policy, and have a look at Policy 6. Now, that pink area on Policy 6 is the area that got flooded. And that area was designated in 1997 by Baroness Young from the Ramsar Treaty of Wetlands, Diversity Wetlands in Ramsar in 1971, under an EU directive for biodiversity and wading birds to flood certain areas of the world. And that particular area was flooded. So it was fulfilling that, and it was for biodiversity. So what we're finding now is that Somerset is flooding again. They're telling us, they're warning us, and this particular picture is quite emotive. This is what we're getting at the consultations about flooding and how to have resilience against flooding in Somerset again. And I think we'll have the next slide. Which is, this is how you have to ensure your house against flooding, put your TV on the wall, sort of build up your front step, have sandbags. All of this is being let's put the infrastructure in to stop it flooding. It's what we can do for resilience. So it's a deliberate thing. It's going to happen again. And the next slide is really about they're recruiting flood wardens to help with this. It's community involvement. Get the flood wardens out. Yes, that's what they'll do. And I'm just looking at some of the NGOs that are really funding this, and it's all green NGOs. And you'll find that FWAG, the one there, which is I can't even remember what the acronym is. I think I've got another slide. These are all the NGOs that deal with it, and FWAG is the I can't remember. Sorry, I should remember this. But anyway, it's a very green NGO that promotes planting of trees and building little dams to stop the water. Now, you can't plant trees and hedgerows at this stage because it's too late. We're going to flood this year coming. We're going to flood. And I'm seeing that this is all part, again, I'm linking all this up to the 17 goals. And this is 2 goals. There's life on land, which is really all about climate change and mitigating things with green initiatives, but not with proper infrastructure. And we've got another one, which is obviously climate action. Everything is blamed on climate change. Carbon and life processes become the new global currency. Everything is blamed on climate change, and this will be. So we've just got another history repeating itself and another destruction of British farmland.
Thank you for that, Sandi. Okay, we'll see what happens over the winter, but as you said earlier, it's looking like the forecast is for quite a wet winter after a very dry year. So I'm quite certain that you're absolutely right on this. Well, look, we got to leave it there for today. Thanks to Brian, to Sandi, and to Vanessa. Did you have something you wanted to add?
One ticket left.
Oh, what?
There is one on location ticket left. Who is going to be the lucky person who gets that? We will give you a hug. One ticket left.
Now you've heard it. It's been on the news. Now you're going to get a hug when you go. You got to come,
whether you like it or
not. You've got to
not.
find Brian, and you've got to demand your hug for the person who buys the last ticket. Okay, we do have to leave it there. Thank you very much, Vanessa, Sandy, Brian, and we'll be back in a few minutes for extra. Thanks for joining us. Bye bye.
Bye bye.